Okay, think it's on me. Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for taking time to join our final webinar of the summer DEI series. Sorry, a dog ran up on me. Our summer DEI series, When Did Diversity Become a Dirty Word? Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests and advocates for inclusivity, a warm welcome to all of you as we embark on a thought-provoking journey in today's webinar. This event marks an essential milestone in our collective commitment to understanding, promoting, and advocating for diversity, equity, and inclusion in our modern world. In a society marked by evolving complexities, society shifts, and at times divisive policies that target underrepresented communities, we find ourselves at a crossroads. The question that resonates with us today is this: when did the word diversity become tainted, a subject of controversy rather than of celebration? Our purpose here is not only to ask this question, but to explore it deeply and, more importantly, to seek out answers and solutions. We're here to foster a robust and insightful conversation that goes beyond headlines and hashtags, aiming to uncover the nuances of DEI initiatives in our organizations, institutions, and communities. In these times, the challenges and opportunities related to diversity, equity, and inclusion have never been more significant. Organizations worldwide are grappling with how to navigate these complex waters, and we're here to learn from their experiences, successes, and setbacks. But beyond just navigating challenges, we are here to celebrate progress. Our collective mission is to understand how organizations are not merely surviving, but thriving as they champion diversity and equity. It's about finding those shining examples of workplaces and communities that are actively cultivating an atmosphere of inclusion, while every voice is valued, every perspective is heard, and every individual is given an equal opportunity to succeed. Today's conversation isn't just about discussing the problems, it's about identifying the solutions, building bridges, and inspiring action. It's about transforming the narrative around diversity and equity from one of divisiveness to one of unity, understanding, and empowerment. Let us unite in our commitment to genuine support for diversity and inclusion. Let us stand together as catalysts for change, armed with knowledge, empathy, and a shared determination to make a difference. Together, we can rewrite the narrative, reshape our organizations, and create a world where diversity is not just a word, but a living, thriving reality that enriches us all. Thank you for joining us on this enlightening journey this evening. Together, we can make a profound impact and build a more inclusive, equitable, and harmonious future for all. And at this time, I'm going to ask my colleague to launch one of the polls for us so that we can kind of see who's in our audience and we kind of help to drive the conversation today. Darius, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Ebony, for kicking us off on this webinar, this important topic, this timely topic. I'm joined today by some very esteemed panelists who are going to offer us some of their perspective and their lived experiences and their current experiences on what diversity is, what diversity has become, and when and if diversity has become a dirty word. So MANRRS has earned its place as the premier organization over the last 40 years or so that cultivates and brings together diverse talent. And we're talking about top performing, high impact talent. And so as this organization continues to thrive into the next generation and to continue to support the next generation of scientists, entrepreneurs, policymakers, and advocates for minorities in agriculture, natural resources, and related sciences, it's critical that we navigate these waters, understanding that words have power. And so bringing together this group of esteemed individuals today, we want to have a roundtable conversation and discuss what diversity means and how it impacts our daily life. And more importantly, how do we get beyond the word and get down to the root meaning of the spirit of the word? So I'm joined by Dr. LaVon Esters. LaVon is the Dean of the graduate school at the Pennsylvania State University. Dr. Levon Esters was named Dean of the Graduate School and Vice Provost for Graduate Education at Penn State in December of 2022, beginning his appointment on May 1st, 2023. He is world-renowned and nationally recognized as a scholar on mentoring, equity, and diversity and inclusion in STEM-based agriculture and life science disciplines. He's going to provide us his perspective from an academic institution. In addition, we have Ron Turan. Ron is the Director of Talent Acquisition and Diversity and Inclusion for Smithfield Foods. He's based at the Global Foods Company's headquarters in Smithfield, Virginia, directs talent acquisition and diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives to support the company's nearly 43,000 US and nearly 18,000 European team members. He focuses on strategic initiatives that result in hiring a robust, diverse talent pipeline for Smithfield. He's passionate about professionally and personally developing people of all backgrounds and creating opportunities. So he's going to provide some industry perspective. And then lastly, we're joined by a government representative, Ms. LaTanya Davis, who is the Chief Diversity Officer and the first Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at the USDA. Ms. Davis is responsible for leading USDA in its ongoing efforts to improve diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility across the department, and oversees the implementation of the USDA's first ever DEIA strategic plan. And so with that in mind, I'm going to allow our individual panelists to introduce themselves and kind of weave their personal story into some of the questions that we have for today. But really what I want to do is just kind of get start off by just, and we'll start with you, Ms. Davis, on what is diversity? What does diversity mean to you? And how does the thought of diversity in this current political and economic and social climate, how does it impact your daily moves?
Sure. Well, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. As you mentioned, I'm LaTanya Davis. I'm the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at USDA, and I have been in this role nearly 6 months, so a little over 5 months. Being in this role at this time is very interesting and challenging, right? So to me personally, diversity means having people with different experiences from different backgrounds, different abilities, contribute and add their voice to the conversation, right? Making space for them at the table. And that's one of the things that I'm working to do at the United States Department of Agriculture, which is international, and we have well over 100,000 employees as part of this department. So it is no small feat. It is very challenging to work to address diversity at this point in time. And I know we're going to talk about it a little bit more, but in light of the current climate, not only externally, but also internally, people still seem not to be able to understand what diversity is and not necessarily believe in the value and the science and the research that has proven diversity really adds to creativity and innovation and better problem solving. So I'm looking forward to this discussion today, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Ron, so providing some industry perspective and with your own I guess personal journey and introduction, what does diversity mean to you, and how do you think the perception of diversity has changed over maybe the course of your career or just in recent years?
Yeah, so thank you. So and actually my role has changed since probably January of this year. So I'm actually now the Director for Diversity, Culture, and Engagement. So with that, I oversee all of our DEI efforts as well as our employee experience and engagement efforts here at Smithfield. So when we think about DEI, I have a clear focus now on not just diversity and inclusion, but also inclusion and belonging. And I do see the active balance in both of those within the organization. As far as diversity, for me, it's about our differences. It's about, the fact that each of us, is unique because of our characteristics, but also the things that we were born with, the experiences that we've had, the decisions that we've made and continue to make, that truly influence and impact our lives and those around us. In terms of what it means from an industry standpoint, I agree that it has become a lot more difficult, particularly around, helping individuals truly understand what diversity is, how to leverage it within organizations to really drive business impact, but most of all to really create a more inclusive and belonging culture within organizations has become even more difficult just by utilizing the terminology of diversity. When I think about it over time and how it's evolved, there was a time, and I'll say before George Floyd, where in which we didn't necessarily use the term diversity all the time. However, when you had what I would consider really good focused development practitioners, as well as leaders within an organization, they just naturally weaved in diversity and initiatives as well as programs, towards growing the organization and individuals within. So, it was very intentional, but again, the terminology of diversity wasn't necessarily used, particularly in titles of roles, departments, etc. So it's evolved since then, and I think this is an interesting topic and can't wait to discuss it further, because it's going to be a good discussion around how that word has truly changed and impacted organizations at large.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And Dr. Esters, and from an academic standpoint, and you are renowned for your work in this space, particularly. So how have you seen the word, the use of the word evolve, I guess, and over your personal lived experiences, and what do you see kind of how it's going to impact our higher education system? I know different states have different policies, and being a state university or state institution, that may have different implications. So just kind of provide us an introduction to you and your work, and as well as your perspective.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And thanks for having me here today. So I guess where I would start out is that, so my background, so I've been a faculty member, professor now for 20 years. And, so let me back up. So give you some insight into me. So I'm originally from Chicago. So from the South Side of Chicago, then went to pursue my academic career, if you will, my pursuits at 2 HBCUs. So I had that perspective. And then when I graduated from Penn State with my PhD, I then took a job as a faculty member at Iowa State. Was there for 5 years. And then the last, 15, I was at Purdue University. And now, as you stated at the beginning of this conversation, started here. Today's month 4 in my role as Dean of Grad Education and Vice Provost of the Graduates, or Dean of the Grad School and Vice Provost for Grad Education, at Penn State. So throughout my entire career, I've been one that has made it a priority to bring diversity into higher education, especially in colleges of agriculture, which, as you can imagine, at places like Iowa State, Purdue, Penn State, at the graduate level, which is where most of my work is focused, that is not the norm. And folks became known for one who had a steady stream of Black graduate students when I was at Purdue University over the 15 years I was there. We did a lot of good work. But for me, I would say early in my career, when you thought about diversity or the way individuals would view diversity, it was in terms of, Black and white, right? Very simply. But now we have, I think the aspect of diversity that has been alluded to already. Diversity is this notion of difference, right? But for me, I think the aspect of diversity that I would like to make mention of is that of identity and the importance that we all have. We all have multiple identities, right? Whether it be being single, being a professor, being being an athlete, you name it. So we all have these different identities that we have to negotiate. And I think what you're finding nowadays, even more so, is a focus on the identity aspect of diversity, as much as this difference of just race, if you will, or black and white, as I alluded to just a minute ago. So, you know, we as a society have come a long way in terms of how we view diversity, especially with the younger generation more so now, especially as it relates to identity. And so for me, in the work that I've done over my career, I've made it a point to really respect the identities of my students, to make it known that no matter what identity they hold, when they're in a space with me in that space, that they will be respected and that others need to respect them as well, and vice versa. So for me, that's kind of how I look at the role of diversity in the work that I do, and even more so now in the role that I have now, being over graduate education at Penn State University, which, as many of you know, is a large comprehensive institution. There's some work that needs to be done, and I'm going to continue down this pathway of making sure that diversity is front and center in terms of what we do in graduate education here.
Absolutely. Thank you for that perspective. And so again, this is a very well-rounded group, and I'm happy that we were able to convene this particular group. And so from each of your perspectives, when it comes to kind of discussing diversity in this current climate, again, we can talk about the past and where we've been and where we are now. In terms of discussing diversity or the idea of diversity, again, it kind of meets all of the objectives of each of your organizations, academic, government, and industry. But how do we discuss it so that DEI is, as Ebony said, in many cases, DEI becomes DOA, dead on arrival, because of some of the climate that we're in. So just the acronym itself may have some of those negative connotations. So how do we still weave this in and persist in the face of some of the challenges and barriers? And I'll turn it over to Ron first.
Yeah, so thank you, Darius. So, you know, in terms of that, one of the things that I focus on more so now than ever is not the lead in with diversity, but more so the lead in with inclusion and belonging. You know, one of the things in most organizations, if you look around, you know, you will see diverse, underrepresented talent. But what you don't see is that talent represented at all levels of the organization proportionately. So when I talk about focusing in on inclusion and belonging, I also use the term POD, proportionate opportunity disbursement, meaning our individuals who are part of those underrepresented groups getting the opportunities that they deserve, that they've worked for, that they've qualified for at all levels of the organization. And how do we as an organization make sure that we are positioning individuals to be seen, heard, and valued in those spaces? So again, the opportunity to focus in on inclusion at all levels, but also when they get to that level, one of the things that's important is to make sure that they feel like they belong there. So I almost liken it to, you know, that the old cliche term around, you know, you've been invited to the party. Well, I can invite you to the party, but if I invite you to the party and I never interact with you anymore after you get there, you're probably not going to be comfortable being at that party. I haven't offered you a drink. I haven't offered you a snack. I haven't even offered to dance with you, but you're at the party. So again, you're included, but you probably don't feel like you belong and are ready to leave the party. So again, focusing in on the inclusion and belonging aspect of it as a lead in, more so now than the focus on diversity. Again, you know what you see with your eyes. You can see that there's diverse talent around you. You can see where it's not. So understanding where you can move those individuals is important. Making sure you equip them when they get there, before they get there, and after also becomes important to create that level of belonging that should support inclusion.
Yeah, so Miss Davis, so kind of along those lines, kind of in light of, current divisive policies, how do you think organizations and governments, that whether that's government organizations or non-government organizations, can better support underrepresented communities, underrepresented individuals, in light of some of the barriers and obstacles that have been put in place in terms of policies that have been put in place or policies that have been taken away, kind of as the pendulum swings?
Yeah, I think, one of the ways that we are certainly exploring that, particularly in the United States Department of Agriculture, as well as with other government agencies, is to still continue the important work targeting underrepresented populations and others, right? So it's changing the vernacular, right? We're rolling out internships and programs that support all, right? Because it literally is open to all. And moving a little bit away from some of the language that is being targeted. Literally there are searches of documents, and you look for anything that says diversity, anything that says equity, anything that says inclusion. So you got to be a little creative in advancing this work and thinking about how to approach it where it is beneficial to everyone, and those who have historically, systemically been left behind can also benefit. That's really part of our challenge and focus. So steering a bit away from those terminologies on DEI, continuing to do outreach to colleges and universities, right? All of them, in addition to recruiting them. I think internally also, one of the things that we're exploring, we've developed an inclusive hiring toolkit to roll out to all of our managers and supervisors to assist them in hiring. We know that there are biases that show up in the hiring process. So trying to make our hiring managers become more educated about them and aware of when they show up, equipping them with structured interview guides and giving them guidance on how to diversify hiring panels. All of these things are ways that we can help increase the fairness and equity of the process. And by turn, hoping to ensure that we have a pretty diverse candidate pool, who ultimately get jobs and are then hired and onboarded in our organization. So those are just a few ways, right, that we are looking to explore how to move this work forward.
Thank you for that. And so kind of switching to the academic lane, Dr. Esters, in light of some of these things and some of these challenges that come down, and again, line item funding and other challenges that have come under fire from, at the state level and for the academic institutions, how do we continue and including, legislation and Supreme Court decisions and whatnot, how do we continue to be inclusive and make sure that opportunities are available, and that includes both at R1 and R2 institutions? And so we know that only a very small percentage, about a third of our minority students our Black students are at R1 institutions. So that leads us to know that we have a lot of students that aren't at R1s, but certainly have a lot of talent to offer. And so how do we make sure that in light of some of these things that there's still continuity in terms of opportunities across the board?
Yeah, so I think, I know we'll get into this later, so this will be the first time you hear the word, but I think it starts with leadership. You need the right individuals in place, leadership roles more importantly, who have the courage and the foresight to make things happen on behalf of Black and brown folks. If I look at myself as an example, I don't shy away from opportunities to lead and to speak up and advocate for Black and brown folks. That's just not how I'm wired. And so what I've learned over my career is that when you have individuals in place, like I just described, they can make a difference. And to be quite frank, if you have individuals who are in leadership roles who cannot muster the courage to do that, then they need to step aside and let others who can do it. So, for me, I think, when you, again, I think about the work that we did when I was at Purdue University, we had support, or I had support of my colleagues. I had the support of administrators, key administrators. But one lesson I did learn in my time there was that I didn't wait. Like if there wasn't a path, I made a path. And so, when you're doing this type of work, if you wait, you'll grow old real quick. And so for me, I'm just not one to stand around and be a bystander. I lead and bring others along with me. And but again, if there's resistance, then I figure out another way or go around. There's always a go around in many respects. But again, it goes back to this whole notion of leadership and having folks in these spaces that will advocate, that will speak up, speak out, show up, so yeah, so that's what I found, and that's what works. At least what I've noticed as an academic has worked. And I've been at some very large institutions, and it takes time, right? It takes time, it takes effort, but as they say, Rome wasn't built in a day. So, that's what comes in the territory.
Yeah, so I mean, along those lines, we know that DEI is an ongoing journey. Again, you say kind of wasn't built in a day, and so there is an ongoing journey where we continue to struggle with or to deal with this on a day-to-day basis. But MANRRS as an organization has to and has been that constant conduit for aspiring individuals that are one to penetrate this space and providing access and opportunities for individuals in that space. And so, Ron, from a corporate, from an industry and a corporate standpoint, what do you see in terms of effectiveness of making sure that you have leaders that are behind you and really believe in the culture? You talked about your the recent change in your title to Director for Culture and Engagement, or at least including that cultural component in there. And so what do you see in terms of the value of having that buy-in and not necessarily going with the whims of what the current climate, the what's getting the most clicks and whatnot? How do you see that buy-in lead or contribute to the success of Smithfield Foods?
Yeah, that's a great question. That buy-in is invaluable. The ability to have the buy-in and support from the very top of the organization, which I'm proud to say, I have the support from our CEO throughout our executive leadership team. And that buy-in becomes important because it allows me to be able to move comfortably in terms of the things that I need to say, the things that I need to do to hold people accountable to new practices, new policies that support our ability to grow our underrepresented talent. Just the ability to have the conversation in the room that sometimes isn't comfortable, particularly when you utilize terms like diverse or utilize terms Black, female. That becomes a difficult, uncomfortable conversation from some of the individuals in the room who aren't a part of that group. So therefore, I think the opportunity to really lean into the discomfort and turn that into a learning opportunity has become very valuable in terms of leadership support. But most of all, I would say from an opportunity to lead this space for the organization without the ability to leverage that support in conversations, particularly around the ability to transform, culture. This is, Smithfield Foods. And I say this, my father worked here 30 plus years ago. It's not my father's Smithfield. It's very different, particularly in terms of how we look at culture, how we look at talent, when we look at how we value people in terms of their performance, in terms of their potential, versus looking at the color of their skin and or who they know. So really leveraging the opportunity to lean into leadership, their support to really drive those things accountability, I would say, is probably the greatest opportunity to leverage leadership. If they can't hold each other accountable, they certainly can't hold anyone else accountable. So the ability for them to look in the mirror and say, hey, this isn't, the Smithfield that we want it to be. What do we need to do to get there? And to be able to take that advice from, an individual like myself, my team, the individual I report to in terms of our CHRO becomes extremely important to drive the organization towards a different culture. So again, leadership buy-in becomes extremely important. It has to come from the top. It cannot come from anywhere else. If it does not, lead from that, I would say that C-suite, particularly CEO chair, it will be difficult. It becomes easy to hide DEI in other places, to put it under a mat or put it under a rug, where in which you're, 2 levels separated from that discussion. So again, the ability to have that opportunity, that connection, but most of all, that proximity to leadership to share thoughts and ideas around diversity, around inclusion, around belonging, around programs, around the need for support, ancillary needs to really support what's happening in the field, becomes extremely valuable, but not only that, necessary.
Thank you. I appreciate that so much. You talk about proximity to leadership and things like that. And so, Ms. Davis, you are the first in your role. You like you said, you just started, 6 months or so ago, or what'd you say it was 4 months or so ago? 5 months. I'm counting the days. All right. So,
Me too.
but you're the first in your role. So how do you kind of go from and build this ship, while you're sailing, or build this plane while you're flying, in the midst of it'd be different if you were coming in, kind of with the wind at your sails, but it seems kind of like that you may be coming in at a point where there may be a little bit more adversity. And so again, how are you navigating this, and how important is the leadership that you receive from the administration, from Secretary Vilsack and above?
Well, it is really an interesting time, and leadership commitment to advancing this work is absolutely critical. And I think this administration has certainly put a lot of executive orders in place to advance racial equity, diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. It's a whole host of them, and that has been the North Star, if you will. And Secretary Vilsack is certainly leading by example and supporting and advocating for this work. I had the privilege to attend a Congressional Black Caucus policy conference meeting last week, 2 weeks ago, in Biloxi, Mississippi. And we had a panel of USDA leaders. And one of my colleagues got up when he spoke to give an introduction and said, "This is not your grandfather's USDA." Like, look at the panel, which was very diverse. Women, men, African-American, white, various ages, different backgrounds, ethnicities. And we were there to hear and support, right, and certainly work to advance some of the wrongs, right, that our Black farmers primarily in this particular audience had suffered. So leadership commitment is absolutely critical, and I have had that. There was also an investment that was done even prior to me joining the organization, by way of developing and launching our first diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility strategic plan. I am working to stand up a new office, which is a whole feat in and of itself. Hiring people in the government, if any of you all have any clue, that is a challenge too. So working to get, high, talented, diverse folks experience right on board. So all of those things are certainly challenges, not to mention the opposition that we face from Congress, right? And even moving this work forward. So it's not for the faint of heart. And I don't know that it would have been possible without the secretaries and other senior leaders' support of this work. For us, the challenge is also, how do we get this message and start to get this work down where employees at the lowest level understand it, and believe in it, because advancing DEIA is not just the leader's responsibility, it is every member of our organization's responsibility. So that is what we're going to be working on, you know, as we move forward in accomplishing some of our goals.
So with that in mind and kind of, you know, the transient nature, and I hate to kind of describe it like that, but, you know, we know the government administrations are always up against election cycles and things like that. And so one of the kind of institutional, if you think about institutions, obviously our academic institutions are there to continue to kind of provide that realm of thought and diversity of talent. And so Dr. Esther's, again, along these lines and thinking about leadership, how do we continue to create and cultivate leaders? And so there's actually a question from Brianna McCullen in our webinar chat that says, what is a great leader and how does that individual continue to build and expand on their leadership skills? But I want to tailor that specifically to this conversation and in this space. How do we cultivate leaders in our academic institutions so that this work doesn't become so transient and fleeting and kind of ebbs and flows and becomes more consistent and constant in our culture?
Yeah, thanks for the question. And let me see here. Thanks. Thank you, Brianna, for posing that question as well. So the way that you cultivate leaders is as a leader, being able to identify talent and cultivate that talent and provide opportunities for folks. What I've learned over my career is that not all managers, supervisors, leaders are good at doing that. Actually, it takes a skill. It takes a certain skill set to be able to identify, not only to identify talent, but to know how to cultivate talent and to put those individuals in positions where they can be successful. I've been lucky to have folks, mentors and other colleagues throughout my career that have placed me in positions, have nominated me for roles. Those are open doors for me, you know, served as my sponsor, if you will, that has enabled me to be where I am today as I sit here on this call. So that's what it takes to build future leaders, to provide opportunities and open doors. Now, and also to coach those individuals, right? To continue to coach, continue to mentor, give advice, those sorts of things. And don't, I think another thing I would add is, you know, don't be that type of leader that gets in their feelings, if you will, because that individual that you're promoting, sponsoring, you know, passes by you. I mean, that's what happens, right? You know, so I think you need to keep those things in mind. Now, in terms of what makes a good leader, there are a lot of things that make a good leader, right? You have to have courage. You have to have forethought. You have to have some talent, right? Some skill sets. You have to know how to engage individuals. You have to know how to listen. You have to know how to delegate. I mean, there's so many skill sets that it takes to be a good leader, but I think those things is, you know, and to be humble, I think is another key element in being a good, effective leader. Being humble goes a long way, to be honest. And just treat people, you know, fairly and equitably when you can. So all those things I just mentioned make a good leader. And if I think about myself, having enabled me to, again, as I said, be in the role that I'm in now. But, you know, we need folks like those on this call, the 70 plus folks who are on this call today. We need your talent because the future rests in your hands. And so hopefully this conversation today will inspire you all even further than what you currently are, where you are already, to take on opportunities of leadership roles, to make pathways for others, even your peers included. So I think all that as a collective is what matters when it comes to this notion of leadership.
Thank you for that. And so, Ron, I'm gonna ask you a question quickly, and then we're gonna kind of pull some questions from the audience because they're starting to roll in. I want to get their perspective and involvement. Ryan, a lot of times when we think about industry, we think about return on investment. We know that, you know, bottom line is the bottom line, right? And so that's what it comes down to. And so measuring that ROI when it comes to you know, DEI or whatever the particular strategy is for the organization, that can be kind of tricky. You know, kind of putting that into dollars and cents. How do you measure the return on investment for seeking out you know, diverse talent, but obviously top talent as well? How does that impact the organization, and how do you sell that, if you will, to your superiors or to your bosses?
Yeah, that's a great question. And what I'll say is, you know, one of the things that we do here is I've developed what's called a DEI metrics inventory. This inventory of metrics focuses on 5 categories. One is obviously DEI, as well as HR functions in terms of headcount, budget, you know, development, recruiting metrics. And all these things are related to the impact of diverse talent, workforce. And when I look at that, I look at representation. What's our representation internally? How's our representation in terms of how we attract external talent? Internal talent mobility. Are people getting the opportunities to promote, move, or get roles in broader scopes? And then I look at the next category, which is leadership. You know, the ability to, you know, create mentorship programs. Do we have individuals tied to those? The ability to execute, you know, in terms of diversity councils, regional diversity councils, DEI training. The next one is a big one, which I consider probably one of the most impactful, is our employee business resource groups. So do we have people that are participating in those? Are we seeing individuals growing and you know, really engaging the organization to grow their scope and their role? How are we funding those? Looking at funding for that, the return on that in terms of projects that we maybe didn't have to go external to hire for, or to hire a vendor to support by leveraging our employee business resource groups. And then the last category is we look at enterprise impact. So when I think about that, our policies, how are our policies impacting our underrepresented talent, but also is that driving retention, which obviously impacts revenue as well as our ability to retain talent over time. Thought leadership is another one that we look at. Supply diversity is another category that we look at in terms of enterprise-wide impact. But when we look at all those categories, back to your point, Darius, we do consider the ROI is on all of those. While yes, diversity, and I like to say this, is for a lot of people passion projects. When it comes to the ability to engage in business, you know, it still becomes a business imperative as well, in which the organization does expect a return on their investment around this particular initiative.
Oh, absolutely. And I appreciate, you know, that perspective and abilities and metrics to use to kind of measure that, because I think as an organization, even MANRRS, we continue to look for ways to measure our impact. We know that MANRRS alumni and MANRRS students are making an impact across the nation, across the world for that matter. I see we actually have somebody in the chat from our chapter in Ghana. So we have an international chapter that we launched this year, and they're in Ghana, and I see they're in the chat. So happy to, I'm shooting a shout out to our chapter at the university there. But Dr. Esters, again, as we think about the next generation of students, and there's a lot of emphasis on next gen. And so I'm gonna pass this to Dr. Esters first, and then Dr. Davis. When we talk about the next gen and creating that pipeline of talent to make sure that they're interested, you know, you got to be interested to be included, right? And so we want to make sure that they're interested in the field of agriculture and feel that it's a welcome space, and agriculture, natural resources, and related sciences, and feel like it's a welcome space. And so how do we inspire this next generation in the face of some of the the words that have become weaponized or demonized, if you will? How do we still navigate that and make sure that they still that we don't put out their fire, if you will?
Yeah. So firstly, just be a good example, right? I pride myself in being a good example to students, regardless of race or background, color, right? So leading with integrity, engaging with individuals thoughtfully and respectfully. Again, when you're in a leadership role, listening in anticipation, listening to what the issue is that the individual, in this case, a student, maybe bringing to your attention, excuse me, and trying to figure out, okay, how can I help this student, figure things out? How can I lead them in a way that, for that matter, they can become empowered to figure out the solution, or, take it upon myself to remove the barrier for the student. So I think that comes into play. But again, I think for me, it comes down to being a good example, listening, creating programs for students, which is what I continue to do, students, especially those from HBCUs. So, I'm always thinking of ways, how can I pay it forward? I think what I would end with is, I tell folks all the time that I would not be sitting here. Well, let me say it this way. I would not be sitting here on this call with you today if folks didn't open doors for me and pay it forward. And so for me, I feel obligated to do the same thing, because at the end of the day, when I leave this great earth, the talents I have, I can't take with me. So I look at it almost like a philanthropist. I just give it away. I just give advice, I share my wisdom, open doors, so on and so forth, because that's what I'm supposed to do, because someone helped me get here. And so I have to pay it forward. So I think for me, leading in that manner that I just described, living the manner in which I just described, matters. And it is what has helped me put students in positions where they can then grow and develop, and then themselves thrive and become leaders as well.
And Ms. Davis, so can you talk about, again, things that your office is doing to make sure that the future is inclusive, that the future and the next generation is included, or there's representation and inclusive from a policy standpoint, from a opportunity standpoint, from the USDA and from the administration?
Sure. So, as you know, USDA is huge, and we have 29 different agencies across the department. So several of them have created various scholarship programs and internship programs targeted specifically for underrepresented populations, college students, to allow for opportunity to work and grow and learn and develop. Just earlier this summer, USDA announced From Learning to Leading, a program called Next Gen, about cultivating the next generation of diverse food and agriculture professionals program. And this particular program, it was over $200 million that was allocated to fund programs for minority serving institutions, as well as land grant organizations. And that's just one. Our National Resource Conservation Service organization has created an internship program as well, literally targeted for also underrepresented populations. So there are a host of different activities happening across the department. One of the things that we're doing from my particular office, again, my area of responsibility is internal, right? So it's primarily our internal employees, as well as connected to our HR with recruitment. So we're really looking forward to educating and equipping our managers to be more open and inclusive in their hiring, and then working to create an environment internal to USDA where people once they get here, they want to stay, they're nurtured, they're supported, they feel included so they can thrive. And I think it was Ron who made mention of their business resource groups. Over at Smithfield, we're doing quite a bit of investment in revitalizing our employee resource groups, because I think they are a vital source of connection for employees, new employees, as well as existing employees. And if they are supported and nurtured, they can also serve as recruitment ambassadors and the like. So that's certainly another initiative that we'll be leading out of our Chief Diversity and Inclusion Office to try to help create an environment internally where we can help increase retention.
And I'm glad you actually mentioned and ended on retention, because I believe in terms of a lot of the talent that we supply as MANRRS to the field, one of the things that we want to make sure is that they're retained talent and that they feel that they belong. And so, Ron, how do you all continue to keep the pedal to the metal in terms of culture and making sure inclusivity and belonging in the midst of the pressures that we're dealing with today, some of the legal challenges that have been made to academia are now being made on various corporate and other policies. And so how do you, again, obviously, navigate the legal, but keeping the moral imperative to make, and the business case, make the business case for a diverse and top performing workforce?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, one of the things that we do is we focus on, one, truly being very intentional. So, back to, Ms. Davis and what she just commented about the business resource groups, they are vital. So we've been very intentional to continue to grow talent, but also attract talent by growing our employee business resource groups. So just this year, we have gone from having 4 to now we're embarking on 7. So when you consider that, being very intentional to include groups that have been somewhat, I can say, marginalized in terms of some recent decisions from SCOTUS to be included. But again, it is not outside of policy. If anything, we would be embarking far outside of policy from a, I would say, probably negative standpoint. We did not include an eBird that supported our LGBTQIA+ community. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, when we look at our population at Smithfield, the majority population at Smithfield embarks between, African American and Hispanic. So it would be irresponsible if we don't have a Hispanic eBird that supports opportunities for individuals of our Hispanic culture to engage or others to learn about it. So when we consider that, it truly comes down to being intentional, not necessarily shifting the work that we've been doing, but more so making sure that we align the words and the messaging behind it so that it is indeed legal, but also that it does not alienate anyone or, should I say, create any unwarranted attention. However, we will still go about making sure that we are strategic in terms of the outcomes that we want to have and that we want people to be a part of as they become members of Smithfield. But in addition to that, when we look at our strategy from a DEI perspective focuses on 3 things. One is the workplace, which is everybody within Smithfield that we want to keep here that's of a diverse nature. We look at the marketplace in terms of how we show up in the market, by way of what we're doing in the workplace. And then when we consider, everything else, we look externally. So the focus external to Smithfield in terms of how we want to attract the talent. So for example, participating in partnerships with MANRRS is a part of that. Participating in scholarships that we provide to various universities. This month, going into next month, we probably got about 30 schools that we're going to be in touch with and actually on the ground there in terms of gaining visibility, not just for, roles that we have for underrepresented talent, but roles that we have for everybody. So again, focusing back in on that inclusion and belonging aspect and component of hiring and attracting talent. And what we've seen is when we do that, not only are we able to attract talent, but we're able to retain the talent as well.
Thank you. And so kind of as we wrap up, I'll just kind of ask for just kind of a lightning round real quick from Dr. Esters, Ms. Davis, and then finally with you, Ron, in terms of where you see this going and what are some strategies that MANRRS can employ to continue to champion this space. We are kind of navigating this space delicately, but very intentionally and deliberately, and not losing sight of our focus. And so just final thoughts, Dr. Esters, Ms. Davis, and then Ron.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you again for having me, Dr. Burnett, and thanks you as well, Ebony, and also thanks to my fellow panelists. So I would just end very simply by saying the future is bright because of the individuals, and I don't need to see the faces of the participants who are here today or the attendees, but my guess is that the individuals on here today are scattered across campuses across this United States. So our future is bright and we need your talent. And so, what I would say to you is, to stay focused, keep your eyes on the prize, continue to build spaces that are not just diverse, but that are inclusive, and operate with an equity mindset. And, don't be dismayed by or discouraged by, any negativity, any individual that may not support your cause, because, resiliency matters. And so this space, this is a tough space to operate in, to work in. I did this work for 2 years as associate dean at Purdue. But I had 13 years at that time of social capital, so kind of made things easy in some respects. But for those of you who are just starting out, just know that this work is important. It can be done. It needs to be done. And we need folks like you to make it happen. So I just wish you the best of luck. And if you ever need anything from me, just reach out to me, send me an email or LinkedIn, and then I'll do what I can to support you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Esters. Ms. Davis.
Sure. So in closing, I would add to and just echo what Dr. Esters mentioned. We have lots of opportunity here, and the future really is bright. I think the challenge and opportunity is to focus on the rationale. What is the mission of your organization, right? What are you in business to do, right? Is it to make money? Is it to instill a vision and drive a vision? And then connect driving this work, diversity, equity, inclusion, connected to that. We know that we are produce better results when we have a more diverse group that is working together. So I would just say, be intentional, take small steps, and I am happy to connect in any way I can with anyone participating on the call. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and congratulations on your position. And then
Thank
Ron.
Yeah, so, again, thank you for having me as a part of this panel. I think this is important work that you all are doing. You all have a tough job. In closing, I would just say, focus on potential. This is something I think that you all do a great job at, and be intentional to really recognize that, some talent does not share similar advantages and experiences like that of mainstream talent. This is going to require, need to be very intentional around optimizing, the potential of those individuals that are part of MANRRS. Continue to provide those opportunities and access to growth-focused networks, just as you all do on a normal basis, but do it even more, become more intentional about it. In addition to that, stay true to your programmatic development, coaching, and mentorship opportunities. I think as we continue to face some of the challenges that we have today, this is what it's going to take. It's going to take the ability to impart knowledge between all of us and really keep that inclusive mindset as well as the ability to focus on those things that make us who we are, and not be ashamed to show who we are.
Thank you so much, Ron, and thank you to all of our panelists. And so I'll pass it back over to our COO, Ms. Ebony Weber, to close us out. And so this has been a great webinar. Thank you.
Thank you. Great webinar, and good job, everyone. Before I get started, I want to remind the audience, if you wouldn't mind taking time to fill out the survey. As MANRRS is growing and wanting to be a thought leader in this space, your feedback will help us to continue to improve on these webinars and continue to build thought-provoking and very relevant conversations, not only for our webinars, but also for our diversity summit that we have as part of our national conference. What an enlightening and empowering journey has been through our webinar tonight. We've traversed vital conversations, shared experiences, and explored solutions in our collective pursuit of a more inclusive and equitable world. As we draw this webinar to a close, let us take a moment to reflect on the insights and wisdoms we gathered throughout our time together. Our discussions have illuminated the challenges and complexities surrounding diversity, equity, and inclusion in today's society. But more importantly, they have showcased the resilience, determination, and innovation of individuals and organizations committed to making a difference. Our journey has reminded us that while the road to true inclusivity may be fraught with obstacles, it is also illuminated by the brilliance of countless individuals dedicated to this cause. We have learned that diversity is not a divisive word, it's a force for good, a source of strength, and a wellspring of innovation and creativity. Let us carry knowledge, inspiration, and determination forward from this webinar. Each of us has a role to play in championing equity and advancing diversity and inclusion. Whether it's in our workplaces, communities, or personal lives, let's be a catalyst for positive change. Remember that this journey does not end here. It is a lifelong commitment to creating a world where diversity is celebrated, where equity is non-negotiable, and where inclusion is the norm. Our actions, both big and small, will shape this future. We extend our heartfelt gratitude to our distinguished panelists, and most importantly, to each of you for your active participation, thoughtful insights, and unwavering dedication to this call. It's your collective energy that makes progress possible. As we conclude this webinar, let us carry forward the knowledge that we are not alone. We are part of a global movement and a community of change makers who believe that diversity is not a dirty word, but a powerful one for a brighter and more inclusive future. Thank you for your time, commitment, and passion. I am MANRRS, you are MANRRS, we are MANRRS. Good night, everybody.
Thank you, Ebony. Good night.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. I appreciate you.
Thank you to all our panelists. We appreciate y'all.